following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Thursday, June 11th. Your readers today are
Ted Pietracki
and Pat Lamont. And let's see what's happening in the weather. Clouds and sun, breezy and humid today with widely separated thunderstorms, a high of 80. A stray thunderstorm tonight, a low of 73. A couple of showers and a thunderstorm tomorrow. Thunderstorms can bring hail and damaging winds. A high of 77. Saturday, mostly sunny, a high of 78 and a low of 66. And nationally, the extremes high was in Needles, California, 99 degrees. The low in Pinedale, Wyoming, 27. Sunrise this morning at 5:36 a.m. and sunset tonight at 8:54. And our weather trivia. For what reason did Audrey and Agnes make weather history? They were the worst two June hurricanes. And just for our own information, we may have a lot of possible 15 hours and 18 minutes of sunshine. I don't know about that. I just noticed that, and we need the rain, but I don't think we're going to have that much sunshine. And now to our front page. Parish is okay with prepackaged bankruptcy process, lawyer says. Catholic parishes in Western New York unanimously agreed that they should pursue a rapid prepackaged bankruptcy process to settle child sex abuse claims and end the Buffalo Diocese prolonged Chapter 11 case, according to a lawyer for the parishes. Every single parish is aligned on taking this approach, attorney William Hewer told a federal bankruptcy judge on Wednesday. The parishes are united. They are ready to go forward with this process. Meanwhile, lawyers for the Buffalo Diocese and for the official Committee of Unsecured Creditors, which represents nearly 900 sex abuse claimants in the diocese bankruptcy case, said they will have an amended plan of reorganization and disclosure statement in the hands of Chief Judge Carl Buckey of U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Western District of New York by next week. Those documents will be much more complete than when the first plan and disclosure statement were filed last October, according to Stephen Donato, lead attorney for the diocese. Donato said the only missing piece will be an exhibit detailing non-monetary elements of the settlement, which are still being worked out between the diocese and the committee. Hearings could start as soon as August on the disclosure statement will explain how more than $300 million settlement in principle between the diocese and the creditors committee will be funded and paid out. A healthy chunk of that money, likely $75 million in cash and other $30 million in proceeds from property taxes, is expected to come from parishes. However, Hewer said the rapid prepackaged bankruptcy process would have little effect on the operation of parishes because it is designed to provide very targeted, narrow relief. The only class of claims to be addressed will be sex abuse claims. Everything else will get buy-through treatment, be unimpaired, be paid in full through the ordinary course of business, said Hewer. That means a parish payments to regular creditors such as contractors, utilities, and other vendors would not be affected, nor would a parish's ability to take out loans or pay employees be altered. It's a really very important part for the parishes because they want to be able to go on, and they should be able to go on and continue their business and serving their communities, he said. Catholic schools will also be unimpaired by the process. Hewer represents 136 parishes that went through rapid prepackaged bankruptcies in connection with the Diocese of Rockville Center, which in 2024 reached a $323 million settlement with abuse victims as part of its Chapter 11 reorganization plan. All parishes in that Long Island diocese filed bankruptcies and became additional debtors in the Rockville Center Chapter 11 case the night before the confirmation of the diocese's reorganization plan, Hewer stated. The parish and diocese had a confirmed plan about 19 hours later, he added. The same process will be used with parishes in Western New York. Hewer succeeded Timothy Leister as co-counsel for parishes in the Buffalo Diocese after Leister was appointed on May 29th as judge in Rochester for the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Western District of New York. He said he has met with pastors, lay trustees, and parish finance councils over the past few weeks to spell out the new plan and answer any questions and concerns about how it will impact parish operations. Are you confident they're all willing to sign on to this agreement? Buckey asked during an hour-long hearing on Wednesday morning. Hewer responded saying he already has received signed authorizations from trustees for all Catholic parishes in the Buffalo Diocese except one to enter a rapid prepackaged bankruptcy process that would settle child sex abuse claims. The authorization from final parish is anticipated to happen soon. Hewer said that his conversation with parishioners and pastors have helped clear up some misconceptions that the parishes will be pursuing their own bankruptcy simply as a way to assist the diocese, which is not correct. Parishes are defendants in these cases too. Parishes need to understand their exposures as well. At a time for Buffalo Diocese bankruptcy filing, lawyers for the diocese and for the parish never envisioned parishes filling their own bankruptcies in response to hundreds of Child Victim Act lawsuits alleging sexual abuse by clergy and other employees. The diocese's bankruptcy plan from the start was to shield parishes from the lawsuits by seeking a court order that would force all abuse claims to be settled through a trust funded by a diocese, the parishes, and other parties, including insurers. But a landmark 2024 U.S. Supreme Court decision changed the bankruptcy rules and largely blocked that path. The nation's highest court, in a case involving opioid manufacturer Purdue Pharma, decided that non-debtors in bankruptcy proceedings can't receive liability releases without the consent of all creditors, upending what had been standard practice in many Chapter 11 cases. Lawyers for the diocese and the official committee of unsecured creditors tried to use an opt-out voting process to seek consent from all creditors for third-party releases, but Buckeye ruled that the law required an opt-in voting procedure. The lawyer said opt-in voting would not result in the consent necessary to make the settlement deal work.
Also on today's front page, lame duck status is dogging Trump amid a series of setbacks. President Trump is trying to project political strength as he turns 80 on Sunday, but setbacks at home and abroad are exposing the limits of his power and pushing him toward the kind of lame duck status he has told aides he is determined to avoid. Nearly 17 months into his second term, the courts are pushing back. His effort to wind down the Iran war has stalled, and his approval ratings have weakened. Some fellow Republicans in Congress are also defying him, though his hold on the core supporters remains firm. Still, Trump has shown he retains significant clout. He has helped oust Republican incumbents in primary races and has pressed ahead with aggressive trade policies. He's also pursued high-profile construction projects in Washington in one of the most ambitious building drives by a president in years. This dynamic is unfolding ahead of November's midterm elections as Trump's Republican Party scrambles to maintain control of Congress. The loss of one or both chambers to the Democrats could hasten his slide into lame duck phase, historically when a president, if barred from running again, sees influence waning and domestic priorities stymied. The White House is trying to prevent the narrative from taking hold prematurely and has been forceful in letting Republican lawmakers know that Trump can still make or break them, according to a presidential advisor who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive internal matters. But with some Republicans already showing their willingness to stand up to Trump, the advisor acknowledged that it was inevitable that his authority would begin to diminish. He'll naturally start to lose leverage, especially after the midterms, the advisor said. Trump has privately told staffers that one of the reasons he's mused about a third term, which is forbidden by the Constitution, is to ward off any public perception that might become a lame duck and slip into irrelevance, according to a former senior aide who spoke on the condition of anonymity. White House spokesperson Olivia Wales said President Trump is the unequivocal leader of the Republican Party who's committed to maintaining Republicans' majority in Congress. The questions about Trump's political standing come as scrutiny of his personal stamina is intensifying. A Reuters poll in February found that 61% of Americans thought Trump had become more erratic with age, and another survey in April showed a majority concerned about his temperament and mental sharpness. Trump, who is the oldest president sworn into office, will celebrate his 80th birthday by hosting a UFC cage fight on the White House lawn. After a flurry of near-weekly travel early in the year, Trump has largely stayed in the White House or at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida since he launched the Iran war on February 28th. He's only made a handful of domestic trips since then. His public daily schedule consists largely of executive time and policy meetings behind closed doors. He's often more visible on his Truth Social platform, where he posts throughout the day and late into the night. Trump himself declared himself to be in excellent condition following a routine checkup last month after he was seen at public events with swollen ankles, which his doctors have described as only a slight issue, and with bruising on his hands. A senior White House official, who also spoke on the condition of anonymity, said Trump was keen to avoid comparisons to Joe Biden, his Democratic predecessor who faced questions about his fitness before leaving the office at the age of 82. Even so, Trump has occasionally been caught on camera appearing to doze off at events, including at the NBA Finals game in Madison Square Garden Monday night. As clips of him with eyes shut have become viral, Trump aides have fired back on social media, claiming he was blinking or listening intently. White House spokesperson David Engel described Trump as the sharpest and the most accessible president in American history. Analysts agree that even if Trump's political influence wanes, he can still rely on executive orders to shape policy and act more freely on the world stage, where presidents have greater leeway to take action unilaterally. Still, there have been signs of Trump's weakening hand. While he's not likely to see a full-scale Republican revolt, some defeated incumbents who remain in office until January have already begun opposing parts of his agenda and have signaled pushback against his cabinet nominations. One way Trump is likely to continue exercising power is in the selection of the 2028 Republican presidential nominee, seen as a contest between Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. As for the rest of Trump's term, the world should expect the unexpected from a president who prides himself on unpredictability, said Douglas Brinkley, a presidential historian at Rice University. His helter-skelter helter-skelter style of leadership, that's not going anywhere, whether the Democrats take Congress or not, he said.
And you are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour, and we will move on to our editorial. Thinking big. City of Buffalo officials and residents know how to dream big. How big? Take a look at the developing Ralph Wilson Park, where the next phase of construction is beginning. What has turned into a much more challenging and much larger scale project at the old LaSalle Park is transforming the landscape. Rolling hills covered with grass and trees, new ball fields, a new wildlife habitat, and, as reported by the News' Jonathan Epstein, a strengthened shoreline capable of protecting the 100-acre waterfront park from the rough waves of Lake Erie. Phase 2 of the project, that went from 20 to 30 acres on a $40 million cost to what some may deem massive at a $200 million park reconstruction, which will include a new replica Great Lakes freighter. It will anchor the central play area as an interactive feature. The project, as it completes successive stages, most of Phase 1 may not open until 2027, sounds magnificent. Phase 2, projected for completion in 2028, should continue the good work in creating a phenomenal park for all ages. The Ralph Wilson Jr. Foundation is funding much of the park at $110 million, while various state and federal agencies are contributing additional funding. In all, there are 30 funding sources for the park project. Mary Wilson, who wore her late husband's Pro Football Hall of Fame hat at a press conference, said it best: "This is definitely worthy of a Hall of Fame park. We can't wait to play." Signs of progress on the affordable home front in the city of Buffalo are worth noting. Another article by Epstein describes the unveiling of the first homes of the Adams Street Housing Initiative. 4 years ago, the city and the Regional Land Bank announced plans for an inner-city housing project to fill in 24 vacant city-owned lots with new homes. That plan is becoming a reality. The first homes debuted last Saturday. The project is a partnership between the Land Bank, formerly the Buffalo Erie Niagara Land Development Corporation, along with the city, Evans Bank, and Moultrie Murphy and Bergen Realty Group, the brokerage firm handling sales of the properties, to increase affordable housing options on the east side. Even more important, filling in vacant lot means erasing signs of blight. Buyers will be selected by lottery and should contact MMB at 716-534-8495. A Bright Side feature by news reporter Emma Kresge highlighted something the world could use more of: kindness. Last Thursday, sitting in a library full of fourth graders at Clarence Central School, Sheridan's Hill Elementary School, Lauren Bloomberg and Wendy Weisbrot, who are the director and manager respectively of the Holocaust Education Resource Organization of the Jewish Federation of Buffalo, shared the greatest song of all, How Isaac Stern United the World to Save Carnegie Hall by Megan Hoyt. Bloomberg and Weisbrot's mission at the school was to present a kindness suitcase. The suitcase holds a collection of books that help students begin to understand the Holocaust and its lessons in an age-appropriate way. The presentation marked the 100th Kindness Suitcase Hero has presenting in the last 4 years. The good works of spreading empathy, inclusion, and compassion through reading cannot be overstated, especially at a time when understanding and respect for others are needed more than ever.
We turn now to another voice column, which today's article was submitted by Susan Biter, Leah Romeo, and Rabbi Alex Lazarus Klein, who are the co-chairs of the Western New York Jewish Committee on Scouting. And its title is, Scouting Has Been a Welcoming Place for Jewish Communities Everywhere. In 1926, it was tough to be Jewish, both in the United States and around the world. The Johnson-Reed Act of 1924 had specifically targeted Jewish immigration, barring all but a handful of Jews coming into the U.S. On the political scene, Henry Ford's The Dearborn Independent regularly released anti-Semitic tropes. Membership in the Ku Klux Klan was on the rise, and Hitler's Mein Kampf was a bestseller. The one group who consistently welcomed Jews and made them feel included was the Scouts. Founded in 1907 by Robert Baden-Powell, central to the ethos of the Scouts is duty to God. Non-sectarian in nature, Scouting has been open to all religious and spiritual communities alike, including Jews. So when the National Jewish Committee on Scouting was founded a century ago, it did not seem that remarkable at all. In retrospect, it was revolutionary. For 100 years, Jews have been fully represented in Scouting, both in America and around the world. Here in Western New York, there have been Jewish troops since the beginning, with many of our families having several generations of participation. There are now a dozen or so Jewish Scouts locally, both in Scouting and Girl Scouts of America. They proudly earned their Maccabee, Ter Tamid, and Eitz Chaim emblems, and their eagle and gold projects have enhanced the life of our community. In Israel, Scouting is the most important youth activity by far, with over 50,000 participants. The mission of the NJCOS is to prepare young Jews to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetimes by instilling in them the values of Judaism as expressed in the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. There are approximately 150 active Jewish troops in America today and several thousand Jewish participants. Sadly, a century has done little to dim the threat of anti-Semitism in this country as well as around the world. A recent report by the Anti-Defamation League and Jewish Federations of North America found that over half of the Jewish Americans experienced some form of anti-Semitism in the past year, and almost 20% reported being a victim of an attack. Given these circumstances, we continue to be profoundly grateful to the Scouting movement for welcoming us in with open arms. And over to you, Pat.
And our editorial cartoon today is from Tom Stiglick of Creator Syndicate. It is one frame. It is President Trump and the Meet the Press girl. I don't remember her name.
Christian Walker.
Okay, thanks, Chris Walker. And his appearance on Meet the Press. And the title of the picture is How to Handle the Biased Press. And he is gotten up from his chair and is walking away, and she, with a great look of anger on her face, says to him, "But I'm not done interrupting you," referring to his walking off of that Meet the Press segment.
And we turn now to the national opinion pieces, and their first one comes to us from David Madland, and it's entitled, Rideshare Drivers Win Could Bring Big Changes. Uber and Lyft drivers in Massachusetts recently secured a major breakthrough in the struggle for union representation of rideshare drivers. On May 25th, the App Drivers Union announced that it had been certified by the Massachusetts Department of Labor Relations as the official bargaining representative for approximately 70,000 rideshare drivers in the state. That means drivers can now start legally bargaining for a contract to improve their pay and benefits. This would be the largest new private sector bargaining unit since 1941, when more than 80,000 Ford workers in the River Rouge plant unionized and selected the United Auto Workers as their bargaining representative. American workers have not been able to succeed on this scale for the past 85 years, in part because the National Labor Relations Act, the federal law that controls most private sector workers' unionization efforts, makes it very hard for workers to form a union. This is especially true for isolated workers like rideshare drivers. The NLRA also channels most bargaining towards a solitary work site, even as most work sites no longer resemble large factories. In contrast, under the Massachusetts rideshare law passed by state voters in 2024, workers can form a union through an easier process and bargain across the multiple firms to cover the entire industry, often known as sectoral bargaining. Similar laws have spread to California and could soon be adopted in Illinois. These laws would create a model of unionization that could improve other kinds of jobs and revive the job labor movement. The new laws hold promise. Sectoral bargaining models have worked in other highly challenging industries in the U.S. history, like garment manufacturing, which helped transform an industry notorious for sweatshop conditions and firms avoiding responsibilities for fixing them into one with decent jobs. Rideshare drivers currently contend with low pay, inadequate benefits, occupational injuries, and potential violence from passengers. They also face algorithmic compensation setting and the threat of arbitrary deactivation. What's more, the rideshare industry will likely be among the first industries hit by a major job loss due to artificial intelligence, as autonomous vehicles become increasingly common. Massachusetts drivers hope to secure a contract that addresses these issues by the end of the year. The rideshare bargaining law provides for mediation and arbitration, which can prevent the tedious employer delays common among the NLRA. Drivers in California could potentially secure a first contract even before drivers in Massachusetts, as prior stages of California implementation have moved more quickly. If rideshare drivers in both California and Massachusetts reach collective bargaining agreements, around 900,000 workers would gain union coverage. That would mark a major turning point, wiping out the gradual decline in private sector bargaining coverage during the last 20 years. Rideshare drivers in Massachusetts and California are making progress towards achieving a historic first contract that could improve the quality of their jobs, as well as provide proof of concept for a model that could help many other workers. It's a cause that we should all support.
And our next opinion, you are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News. The time is 29 minutes after the hour. We'll continue with our opinion pieces next, coming from Andreas Kluth of Bloomberg Opinion. The War Powers Resolution really is working, even if it fails. Donald Trump may pretend that he finds the quagmire he caused in the Middle East very boring. But even accounting for his notoriously short attention span, I find it more plausible that the president is starting to panic as three realities start to sink in. First, he's losing the ability to declare victory and walk away from his war against Iran, since the adversary clearly doesn't feel defeated. Second, he's losing ordinary Americans who hate being at war, and not only because they're paying so much at the pump. And third, he's losing Congress. That last insight must come as a shock to a president who until recently viewed the legislature controlled by his own party roughly as North Korea's Kim Jong-un or Russia's Vladimir Putin regard their rubber stamp parliaments. But last week's concurrent resolution in the House of Representatives, which is now headed for the Senate, signaled a different direction. Passed with 4 Republicans joining the Democrats, it directs the president to remove U.S. armed forces from hostilities against Iran unless explicitly authorized. The resolution won't actually coerce Trump to withdraw, even if the Senate adopts the House version. A concurrent resolution merely expresses the sentiment of Congress. It doesn't have the force of law. To be binding, it would have to follow the usual legislative process, which requires a signature by the president, or, since he won't give it, 2/3 supermajorities in both chambers to override his veto. That's hard to imagine for the rest of Trump's term, even if Democrats win big in the midterms, but all of that doesn't matter much. What matters politically, Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island told me, is that the trend of the various anti-war resolutions is already putting pressure on Trump. Through successive attempts to constrain his war waging, which started last fall when the administration began striking civilian boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, we've gradually accumulated more and more Republican colleagues, and that's sending a strong signal to the president that if he keeps this up, at some point we'll get this thing passed. Reid, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, is among many legislators who regret that we have not vigorously insisted upon our constitutional responsibilities. I mean, one of our responsibilities is to confirm nominations, and yet we confirm people who are clearly not qualified. Just look at Trump's cabinet, but in the mother of congressional prerogatives, enshrined in the Constitution is the power to declare war. The last time Congress made use of this enumerated power was 1942. Since then, America has waged plenty of other wars in all but name, with presidents liberally interpreting their role as commanders-in-chief. By the time of the Vietnam non-war, though, Congress had enough. It adopted the War Powers Resolution, which requires presidents to notify Congress when hostilities start, then gives them 60 days to seek congressional authorization. Without it, troops must be withdrawn. All administrations since of both parties have questioned whether the War Powers Resolution is constitutional. In practice, though, all presidents have felt politically constrained by it. For example, when George Bush went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, that he first sought and received authorizations for use of military force from Congress. Since starting the Iran war on February 28, the Trump administration has consistently contradicted itself, arguing that it doesn't need congressional approval while also signaling that it doesn't want to run too afoul of the War Powers Resolution. It did notify Congress after Operation Epic Fury began. It then implausibly argued that the war was terminated in early April with a ceasefire to avoid triggering the 60-day deadline of the War Powers Resolution, which expired on May 1st. Call this phony war whatever you want, but it is hardly terminated. The ceasefires in the Gulf and in Lebanon show little ceasing and much firing. Trump keeps promising a memorandum of understanding, but simultaneously signals that the war could turn hot and big again any moment. And yet he is now scared of that scenario. It seems to me that he understands that he's trapped. One sign that he worries about the trend in Congress is the idea the administration is reportedly hatching in case it wants to resume full-bore war in the Gulf. In that case, it will use a new code name. Instead of continuing Epic Fury, it would be starting Sledgehammer. Who in the White House comes up with these names? You can then expect the administration to argue this is an entirely new war with a new 60-day window. How risible. And how desperate the White House has noticed that Congress has subtly changed course, away from gradually becoming a rubber stamp parliament and back toward being a robust check on executive power. As the founders envisioned, and as King Charles III so slyly reminded Congress the other day. Also, last week, the House passed an aid package to Ukraine, which Trump opposes after 18 Republicans broke with their party and joined Democrats. Trump must know that he can no longer indulge his wildest ideas to leave NATO and seize Greenland, say, unopposed. Gregory Meeks of New York, the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and leader, began both the Iran and the Ukraine measures, proclaimed a significant turning point, a signal that if Trump won't clean up his own mess, Congress will. That is too optimistic, but something big did happen. It's that one of the world's most vaunted legislatures, in limbo for more than a year, has pointed its bow away from Pyongyang and back to Philadelphia.
Our next opinion piece comes to us from Anita Cambria, and it's entitled, What the Primary Chaos Truly Says About California's Democrats. The first rule of primary elections is this: don't make too much of the results. The intrepid folks who bother to cast a ballot in these first-round races are largely a group of engaged voters, and drawing conclusions from such a narrow minority is a losing game. So however the final June results tally out, the lessons learned won't easily translate to the larger electorate and will most surely show up in November. But if this election doesn't tell us much about what fall voters will do, it does tell us something about the Democratic Party that dominates this state. It's chaotic, to put it gently. And no, that's not entirely the fault of the jungle primary. Traditional rules seem to have broken down, not a bad thing. New ones haven't yet emerged, though. The old guard has lost control, and maybe vision, and the result is more candidates willing to sidestep seniority and wait your turn mentality to try their luck, especially the younger progressives. Sometimes that chutzpah works. Sometimes it doesn't. But it's a mirror of the national trend of Democratic infighting and a glimpse into just how fragmented the party has become as it tries to figure out who it stands for and who it supports before the 2028 presidential election. I'm feeling like I'm definitely running against major institutional forces, but that's how it is, State Senator Scott Wiener told me recently. At times, we see sort of a little bit of a fortress mentality, and the other perspectives are not welcome. And younger folks, newer voices are not welcome. And that's a dynamic that plays out in a lot of different places. Wiener, who could be considered king of the line jumpers, just took the top spot in the San Francisco-centered race to represent the 11th Congressional District held by Nancy Pelosi since 1987, when Wiener was 17 years old. By most accounts, Pelosi and Wiener had a mostly cordial relationship until last year, when he entered the race before she announced her retirement. Announcing his campaign before she officially made that decision or had the chance to choose her successor sent shockwaves through the political firmament. When Pelosi endorsed Supervisor Connie Chan in May, it was seen by many as a sign of her displeasure. Chan came in second with the Pelosi boost and will face Weiner in November. Across the state, there were other races with upstart contenders. In Southern California, Jake Levine, a progressive Democrat who served in the Obama White House, took on incumbent Brad Sherman. Sherman, who's 71, has served almost 30 years in Congress, resoundingly beating Levine by more than 20 points. In Sacramento, there is May Vang, a progressive city council member who's challenging Representative Doris Matusi, who's another member of the old guard royalty. Vang is in a tie for second place with a Republican contender as remaining votes are counted. And of course, there is the governor's race itself, which included a field so determined and uncontrollable even before the fiasco of Eric Swalwell's sexual misconduct scandal that the state Democratic Party started putting out its own polling in a seeming bid to convince some blue contenders to drop out. Notably, progressive Katie Porter and moderate San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan stuck it in until the bitter end, but the old guard candidate Xavier Becerra came out on top. If these races have a lesson, it's that the different Democratic voters want different things, and the party hasn't figured out how to embrace that other than offering up a moderate middle ground. Irene Kao of Courage California, a progressive advocacy organization that bodes well that so many strong progressive challengers came out for the primary because it allows a chance for candidates outside the party power structure to find an audience with voters, even if they are ultimately unsuccessful. And where voters go, the party will eventually be forced to follow. That doesn't necessarily mean a more progressive Democratic Party, but it likely means a more inclusive one if they want to lure the kind of low information and low propensity voters who make or break a general election. People are sick of the games and sick of people trying to just maneuver things to get their own person in, Weiner said. People want to have choices.
Sumitomo plant set to welcome first lieutenant. The anticipated revival of the former Sumitomo Rubber USA plant is taking one of its first steps forward. A Taiwan-based automotive gear manufacturer plans to lease space in the sprawling town of Tonawanda Industrial Complex, with plans to bring 50 to 75 jobs to the site that once employed more than 1,500. Hoda Industrial Manufacturing plans to lease part of Sumitomo's complex to make gears for the automotive industry, said their executive vice president for U.S. operations. Hoda's operations will involve some production equipment being relocated to Tonawanda from Taiwan and some newly purchased equipment. The installations will take place in the third or fourth quarter, with production expected to get underway in early 2027. The HF Industrial Park has retained a team of about 20 people from Sumitomo plant, including engineers and IT personnel who are experienced with the site. All of us are local, Assad said, all of us here in Buffalo. We have our kids, our families. For us, seeing this plant coming back to life is personal because we help maintain it. The team will help tenants such as Hoda get established inside the plant. They know the place more than anybody else. Some of them have been here for more than 35 years. Astad started working at the plant as an electrical engineer in 2011 when it was still owned by Goodyear Dunlop Tires, North America. Sumitomo later took ownership of the site By the time of the shutdown, Assad was working as general manager of engineering. When HWA Fong Rubber last fall disclosed plans to buy the property, the company said it would set its own tire-making production at the site. It's in the plans, but not in the short-term plan. Assad said he believes more companies want local-for-local operations, placing their manufacturing closer to their customers. That seems to be the response to the supply chain disruptions many companies endured from the pandemic.
Google-backed plan would free mosquitoes for disease control. What's the best way to combat mosquito-borne diseases? Apparently releasing more of the bloodsuckers, according to a Google-backed initiative. The Debug Project is seeking permission from the Environmental Protection Agency to release up to 32 million sterilized mosquitoes in Florida and California over 2 years, according to a May 6th EPA notice. Often carrying diseases, mosquitoes kill more people compared to other species, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Debug uses the naturally occurring bacteria Wolbachia to sterilize male mosquitoes, which cannot bite and do not transmit diseases. The eggs produced from wild female mosquitoes, singular mating with sterilized male mosquitoes, do not hatch, therefore slowing the reproduction of the bad bugs. This is a new way of approaching an old strategy, Raymond St. Ledger, a University of Maryland distinguished entomology professor, said regarding similar methods that use genetically modified pests. Google employees started looking into ways to combat mosquito-borne diseases in 2014. Around the same time, Verily, initially Google Life Sciences, was created. Debug's founders met with worldwide experts and finally created a project in 2016. Many mosquito-borne diseases do not have effective vaccines or treatments, St. Ledger said. Ways to reduce mosquito populations, like insecticides, are often unproductive and can be toxic to other species, he said. Debug is specifically targeting the Aedes aegypti mosquito species, which transmits the most cases of yellow fever, dengue, and Zika, according to Google. The Aedes aegypti can be found in southern and southwestern U.S. states, according to the CDC. The species is dark brown with white stripes on its legs and white spots on its body. Controlling Aedes aegypti's population can prevent diseases from being transmitted to Maryland's resident mosquito species, in turn protecting people from other diseases as well. The U.S. project is based on a successful debug application focused on urban and residential areas in Singapore. Pat.
Interesting. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Bratos Brian. Davila Alicio. Kipley Gerald. Warmy Gordon. Widmer Gary. On the national scene, Steve Almas, 69, punk pioneer of Suicide Commandos. When the last original member of New York's legendary punk band, the Ramones, died in 2014, Steve Almas was the one who faced down the mortality with Minnesota's first widely celebrated punk group. the Suicide Commandos. The Ramones are all dead, and we're still alive, Almus told his bandmates. We should make another record while we're all still here. And also, Yohei Kono, who as Japan's chief cabinet secretary, issued a landmark 1993 apology over women forced to work in wartime military brothels, has died at 89. Local media said he died Monday without specifying a cause. He was a staunch opponent of efforts by former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to push for more muscular military and revise Japan's pacifist constitution. Kono was a rare moderate voice in the conservative ruling Liberal Democratic Party, even after retiring from politics. And once again, if you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555.
And now it's time for our horoscope for today. And as we look at our royal stars, if today is your birthday, June 11th, you are vigorous, focused, and incisive. You can totally immerse yourself in your work without distraction. This is the final year of a 9-year cycle. Take inventory of your life. Do some internal and external house cleaning. Now the stars show what kind of day you're going to have. 5 dynamic, 4 stars positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult. Aries, it's a 3-star day. Be careful spending money today and dealing with financial transactions because you might make a money decision you later regret. Tonight, check your belongings. Taurus, 4 stars. This is a tricky day because in one way you have the advantage of the moon being in your sign, which means you have a bit more luck than all of the other signs. Tonight, you win. Gemini, 3 stars. The vibes feel a little weird today. You are empowered because the sun is in your sign. This is a given. However, today the moon is hiding in your chart. Tonight, enjoy solitude. Cancer, 3 stars. It's a good thing fair Venus is in your sign, smoothing your relations and making you extra diplomatic and charming. Because today, fiery Mars and the moon could get you into trouble. Tonight, be friendly. Leo, 2 stars. Ooh. People notice you today. Be aware of this if you're in an emotional power struggle with someone. This is not pretty. Tonight, you're admired. Virgo, 3 stars. Avoid controversial subjects today because they will quickly raise your hackles and you'll be annoyed. Tonight, explore and learn. Libra, 3 stars. Resist the urge to get caught up in arguments about money, funding, and expenses regarding social outings and vacations, or dealing with your kids. Tonight, check your finances. Scorpio, 2 stars. Be patient and tactful with partners, spouses, and close friends today. It's very easy for a minor irritation to develop into a full-blown confrontation. Tonight, listen and cooperate. Sagittarius, 3 stars. Although there's a lot of obsessive-compulsive energy out there today, the fact of the matter is you can use this energy. Tonight, get better organized. Capricorn, 3 stars. Be patient with your kids today. Likewise, romantic partners should be patient with each other. Tonight, socialize. Aquarius, 2 stars. It's challenging to keep the peace at home right now. For starters, fiery Mars is in this part of your chart, stirring up increased action, irritation, and chaotic energy. Tonight, relax at home. And finally, Pisces 3 stars. You have to admit, you've been feeling feisty lately. The good side is, you've been convincing and persuasive. Tonight, conversations.
And today in history, 1776, Congress appointed a committee to draft what became the Declaration of Independence, with members including Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman. Jefferson's original draft included 86 changes made by Adams, Franklin, and other members of the committee, as well as by Congress. In 1805, fire destroyed nearly all of Detroit in what was then the Michigan Territory. Residents formed a bucket brigade, handling buckets of water to each other from the Detroit River to try to douse flames engulfing wooden buildings. But the city was leveled within hours. And in 1949, country singer Hank Williams Sr. made his Grand Ole Opry debut at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville. The Alabama native, who was born with spina bifida and grew up extremely poor, was called back to the stage by the audience for 6 encores. And in 2001, domestic terrorist Timothy McVeigh was executed by lethal injection at the U.S. prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, for his role in the 1995 bombing of the Alfred Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma that killed 168 people, including 19 children. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Thursday, June 11th on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ted Pajacki
and Pat Lamont.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. And your readers are
Pat Lamont.
and Ted Pajacki. And we turn now to local and regional news. And our first article from that section is Suspect in shooting of U.S. Marshals Task Force is also a person of interest in a homicide. The man charged with shooting through a bedroom door at members of the U.S. Marshals Task Force on Monday is also a person of interest in a homicide case, according to police in Rochester. Keith Holmes, 30, of Rochester, remained in critical condition in Erie County Medical Center, U.S. Attorney Michael Giammaco said. Holmes was shot Monday afternoon at a home on Glenwood Avenue, where police were planning to arrest him on a federal warrant related to violating the terms of his release from prison in 2024. The multiple shots federal authorities say Holmes fired at officers from inside a rear bedroom struck a shield being carried by one of the deputy marshals. None of the officers were shot. Members of the U.S. Marshals Service Violent Fugitive Task Force, which includes federal, state, and local police agencies, attempted to execute a warrant at 861 Glenwood about 3:25 on Monday. They went in, they knocked and announced their presence, and as they approached the bedroom where Mr. Holmes was, Mr. Holmes began discharging a firearm, striking the shield, luckily that was being held by one of the marshals, DiGiacomo said during a news conference on Wednesday. There were at least 2, possibly 3 bullet marks on the shield, he said. The weapon Holmes is accused of firing at authorities was a so-called ghost gun, DiGiacomo said. The term ghost gun refers to a firearm made or assembled at home and does not have a serial number. These weapons can include guns made with 3D printers. For Monday's incident, Holmes is being charged with assaulting a federal officer with a deadly weapon, use of a firearm during a crime of violence, and being a felon in possession of ammunition, DiGiacomo said. Holmes had been convicted in Maine on federal gun and drug charges in 2020. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison and released following a December 2024 grant of clemency by the Biden administration. His case was transferred in February 2025 from Maine to Rochester, according to court documents, which is part of the Western District of New York. Holmes is considered a person of interest in the homicide of Majesty Montgomery, Rochester Police Captain Greg Bello said on Wednesday. Montgomery, who was 29, was reported missing to Rochester police on May 7th. Her body was found the next day buried several feet underground in Yates County, Rochester police reported. Police believe she was killed in Rochester. Normally, defendants being supervised in the Western District of New York are not allowed to leave the 17-county judicial district, DiGiacomo said. But DiGiacomo said he could not confirm the nature of Holmes' restriction. DiGiacomo said he did not know how many times Holmes was shot or where on his body he was shot. Federal officials also declined to say how many task force members fired shots. They also wouldn't say which floor of the house Holmes was on when he opened fire. No one else was in the house at the time of the incident, they said. Body-worn cameras captured the video of the incident, and DiGiacomo said the footage would be released at some point. These are serious charges, because it's no secret what we have seen over the last several weeks here, especially in Buffalo, is we've seen an uptick in aggression towards law enforcement, the region's top federal prosecutor said. U.S. Marshal Charles Salina said he couldn't comment when asked which agencies had members present on Monday or whether the marshals involved were placed on leave following the incident. In his prepared remarks, Salina listed agencies who are members of the task force. They are U.S. Marshal Service, Buffalo Police, Erie County Sheriff's Office, Niagara Falls Police, State Police, and State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. The case remains under investigation by the FBI. Today's charges reiterate the promise that the FBI makes every day, said Brendan Dunford, acting special agent in charge of the FBI's Buffalo office. Violence against law enforcement will not be tolerated. Holmes was convicted in Maine of possession with intent to distribute fentanyl, as well as using a firearm in a drug crime, according to federal court records.
Reach is suing City School Board over pre-K denials. Jockeying for pre-kindergarten classrooms in Buffalo did not start and end in the bidding process. It was briefly a point of awkward discussion by the Buffalo School Board, and with one applicant feeling particularly aggrieved, will now head to court. Reach Academy Charter School is suing the Buffalo School Board for its April denial of 2 applications for universal pre-kindergarten sites. The second time in 3 years, the charter's efforts have been rejected. The charter intended to create 5 classrooms enrolling up to 36 4-year-olds at 111 Ash Street and 54 students at 1224 Jefferson Avenue in the fall of 2026-27. Without explaining the reason why, the Buffalo Public School Board denied both of Reach's requests, said Jennifer Schwarzkopf, the Bond, Schoeneck, and King attorneys who filed a legal complaint on May 29th. She added the Buffalo Schools process to determine which outside entities would house pre-kindergarten classrooms was arbitrary and contrary to what is required by law. Buffalo Schools did not directly address the lawsuit, responding that they do not comment on pending litigation. The conflict comes at a time when Governor Kathy Hochul continues to dedicate state resources to expanding pre-kindergarten offerings with the goal of free opportunities for all 4-year-olds in the state by 2028-29. Buffalo's budget shows a massive rise in pre-kindergarten grant funding heading into this fall. The district will receive $31.8 million after receiving $14 million this year. As Buffalo School Board members considered the board agenda at its April 15th meeting, board member Stephen Wright raised a question about the award of pre-kindergarten classrooms to community-based organizations, which by state mandate are to receive at least 10% of the funding allocated to the school district. Awards went to Holy Cross Head Start, Notre Dame Academy, and Buffalo Academy Science Charter School, the Jewish Community Center of Greater Buffalo, St. Mark's School, Westminster Early Childhood Program, and St. Joseph University School, OLV Human Services, and the Lighthouse. Those awards totaled $3.3 million for 382 students, or $8,600 per student. Several of the sites will host state-supported pre-kindergarten classes for the first time. The 3 community-based organizations that did not receive funding were Primary Hall Preparatory Charter School, which is closing at the end of this school year, as well as Reach and Say Yes Buffalo, whose application relied on Buffalo schools to provide classroom space. Wright and fellow new board member Lewis Hawkins asked the academic officer Annette Botticelli to explain why Say Yes and Reach were not approved for sites. Reach did not meet the criteria for various components of the evaluation, she said, specifying the results of the site visit and documents submitted to the charter school. Hawkins and Wright asked Botticelli what the ramifications would be if they postponed the approval, which Botticelli discouraged. It would affect next year dramatically if we stay too long, she said, and the item passed easily. For the 22-23 and 23-24 school years, Reach Academy was approved for and hosted one pre-kindergarten class each year at its Ash Street campus. For 2024, citing a wait list of roughly 250 4-year-olds, Reach applied for more seats at a second location, its Jefferson Avenue site, that had previously hosted a Head Start according to the legal filing. When Reach's application was denied, it was a complete shock, said Linda Marsalic, the charter's head of school, in the court document requesting an explanation. Reach said that they were told by Buffalo Schools Early Education Department they would have submitted 2 applications, one for each site. We left the discussion believing we had done something wrong, and that resulted in the denial. Fast forward to February, when Reach submitted 2 applications, one for Ash and one for Jefferson. They received 1 batch denial with a score of 66.5 out of 100. In its legal complaint, Reach complied a list of what it considered unfair about the evaluation process, urging the school board to reverse denial and permit the state funding pre-kindergarten classroom at Reach's 2 locations.
And our next article is about some changes in the original plans about a downtown project. And the headline is, Odd Block Developers Criticize Housing Mix. A group of downtown developers and business leaders are criticizing plans to build 251 apartments on the North Odd Block at Canalside because they believe it includes too much very low income and federally subsidized housing. 5 developers, a prominent criminal defense attorney, and a representative of the nearby Golisano Institute, sent a letter to the state, county, and city officials on Wednesday, saying the project developer has quietly changed the nature of the prominent project. They're calling on the state waterfront agency that oversees Canalside to consider changes that would return the $190 million project to its original focus of being predominantly market rate housing, in keeping with the vision for the waterfront district that was developed 16 years ago with significant public input. The North Odd Block project has quietly strayed far from our community plan for the waterfront, a plan which so far has proven successful, the group wrote. The group stressed that they support affordable housing, but in the right context and location. Citing statistics from developer Penrose, they say that 75% of the planned apartments will be, quote, low-income housing accepting Section 8 vouchers, end quote, instead of 30% as originally stated when the developer was selected by the state's waterfront agency. We laud affordable housing in Western New York, the group wrote, citing its support for the nearby Marine Drive apartments and Commodore Perry home expansions. But Penrose plan for this prime Canalside location is misleading and contrary to the original Canalside plan. People are shocked. There's always an expectation that this would be a market rate housing area, said Larry Quinn, the Golisano representative who signed the letter. Are we really going to end up with a place filled with Section 8 certificates? You're not going to rebuild Buffalo this way. But Philadelphia-based Penrose said he is mistaken, and the project is still consistent with its original vision, despite having to add more subsidized units to the mix to make the financing work at a time when market rate projects are difficult to fund. It says the project is about half market rate and half affordable, with equal amounts of apartments priced at market rates and at no more than 80, 60, and 40% of the area median income. And it defined units priced at 80% of AMI's market rate for Buffalo. We've made many changes in the income mix to help get the project to the finish line, said Penrose senior developer Wilbur Devalia. But where we've landed is substantially similar to where we started, and it retains the vision of what we were trying to achieve, a mixed income property at Canalside. Matt?
The Odd Block project is an important component to the overall waterfront development initiative because it would bring hundreds of residents to the area, creating more year-round demand for stores and other businesses in the area. The issue appears to center around the project's financing and what is defined as affordable housing. The letter acknowledges that Penrose is partly paying for the $190 million project using low-income housing tax credits from the state, which require the developer to adhere to low-income ranges. But the group says the change was made without stakeholder or public input. The letter was addressed to Governor Kathy Hochul and Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz, Empire State Development Corporation, CEO Hope Knight, Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan, Common Council member Mitch Nowakowski, and Erie County Harbor Development Corporation CEO Mark Wendell. To sports.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 16 minutes after the hour. And now we turn to the sports section. And with this heat here, the headline for this article is quite appropriate. Out of Miami heat, he's ready to cook. James Cook is back, and it's business as usual for the running back and the Buffalo Bills. Cook, the NFL's reigning rushing champion, stayed away from the voluntary portion of the offseason, but has been in attendance during the first 2 days of mandatory minicamp this week. He's the best back in the league, quarterback Josh Allen said. Comes out here and hasn't missed a step. We've got to see him do what he did last year. He's a tremendous talent, tremendous player, tremendous teammate. We just love having him back. Cook, who's a Miami native, said Wednesday he stayed in South Florida for much of the spring for family considerations. I have kids that stay in Miami, so I wanted to be around them a lot more, he said. Cook stayed away from the Bills' voluntary workouts last season too, although for a different reason. A year ago, he was in search of a contract extension from the team. Ultimately, that deal got done in training camp, a 4-year extension that kicks in starting this season and keeps him with the team through 2029. If he plays it out, Cook will earn more than $48 million on that extension. He provided the Bills an excellent return on investment in 2025, rushing for 1,621 yards. In the process, he became just the second running back in team history to lead the NFL in rushing for a single season, joining O.J. Simpson. Cook, who rushed for at least 1,000 yards for the third straight season, joining Thurman Thomas, who did it for 8 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and Simpson, who had 5, as the only running backs to do that in Bills history. I mean, it was good, but the ultimate goal is to win a championship, and that didn't happen, Cook said, of the individual success that he had a year ago. So we've just got to go back to the drawing board and get better and see what the future holds for this year. Bills coach Joe Brady said Tuesday that although Cook did not attend the team's voluntary practices, he had been in contact with him throughout the offseason. You guys saw how James wasn't here last offseason. I always want our guys here, and I've been in touch with Jimbo the whole time, Brady said. You guys remember how he was when he showed up last season? like he works. We're in touch with everything down there. I'm always going to want guys here, but it is voluntary. It's part of it. Jimbo has a great work ethic and a great approach, and it was really good to be around him on Monday. I'm excited for him to get out there and show what he can do. I know he's excited to be back with the guys again. Earlier this offseason, Cook returned to the University of Georgia to complete his degree. After signing a contract worth nearly $50 million, that's not something every person would do, but it speaks to the work ethic that Cook possesses. It meant a lot, just being at the University of Georgia for 4 years and not getting that degree when I declared for the draft. I owe that to myself, he said. It was great. It was an accomplishment that I had on my goal list, and I scratched it off. So let's keep going. As for his on-field goals moving forward, Cook pointed out one area he felt he had a weakness last year. He fumbled 6 times during the regular season, which was the most in the NFL among non-quarterbacks. Protect the ball. Most importantly, Cook said, I didn't feel like I did a good enough job of that last year. This is a new season. Got a whole off-season to work on it. Got the summer, so we come back and be ready to go.
And from the Sabres, Hellenius named to AHL top prospects team again. Constal Hellenius again has been named to the American Hockey League's top prospects team. The AHL announced the 6-player team Wednesday as named annually by the league's hockey operations department in conjunction with the AHL general managers. Hellenius, a forward, split this season between Rochester and Buffalo Sabres. He also made the 2024-25 HAL top prospects team. This season, he led the Americs in scoring with 63 points, 40 in 63 games, and tied for 9th in the AHL in scoring. The first year was really hard. Everything was new for me, he said last month after the Montreal Canadiens eliminated the Sabres from the Stanley Cup playoffs. The coaches, the playing style, everything. The second year was so much easier. Overall, I'm really happy to help here. It's been an eventful season for the 20-year-old from Jovari, Finland. Hellenius made his NHL debut January 19th with the Sabres in a 2-1 loss against Carolina at Lenovo Center in Raleigh, North Carolina. He scored 1 goal with 3 assists in 9 regular season games, then made his playoff debut May 12th against the Canadiens, finishing with 2 goals in 4 playoff games. Then he scored the golden goal to help Finland win the IIHF World Championship with a 1-0 win in overtime against Switzerland on May 31st in Zurich. You get a chance to keep playing, and of course you want to win here, but to play for something there, that's good for me, Hellenius said last month of playing in Finland. The Sabres selected Hellenius at number 14 for the first round in 2024 NHL Draft. AHL top prospect selections must have been 22 years old or younger on the first day of the regular season, must have played at least 36 regular season games in the AHL, and no more than 30 regular season games in the NHL during the 2025-26 season.
We switch now to a look at what's happening in Major League Baseball and results from last night's games. Last night, Tampa Bay 7, Boston 5. New York Yankees 8, Cleveland 4. Baltimore 7, Seattle 2. Minnesota 6, Detroit 4. Texas 6, Kansas City 4, and that's in 10 innings. And the LA Angels 3 and Houston 2, also in 10 innings. In the National League, San Francisco 11, Washington 10. San Diego 5, Cincinnati 4, Miami 8, Arizona 0, Pittsburgh 9, LA Dodgers 8, St. Louis 9, and New York Mets 2, Colorado 3, and the Chicago Cubs 2. And in interleague play, Philadelphia 7, Toronto 4, Chicago White Sox 2, Atlanta 1, and the Athletics 4, and Milwaukee 3. And yesterday, in Toronto, the Blue Jays' Max Scherzer became the 11th pitcher in Major League history to amass 3,500 strikeouts. The right-hander is the only player with 3,500 strikeouts who's pitched fewer than 20 seasons. And the stat of the day is 200. Designated hitter Josh Bell hit his 200th career homer for the Twins during Tuesday's loss to the Tigers. That's a lot of home runs. Over to you, Pat.
Okay, players, places, and plots. FIFA World Cup, the winner's trophy. After an unusual and at times underwhelming build-up, the 2026 World Cup is suddenly, finally, the spectacle on everyone's mind. From questions surrounding Neymar's health and fitness for Brazil, to political drama between co-hosts United States and Iran, to European complaints about the intensity of North American summers, the World Cup is dominating the headlines. It can be overwhelming for a casual soccer fan who wants to tune in and have some context, but isn't sure which stories are the most important. Fortunately, we have you covered with this handy cheat sheet breaking down the tournament basics, its biggest stars, most anxious injury worries, and most prominent off-field dramas, and most tantalizing group stage matches. Okay, the 5 World Cup tournament basics. The teams, 48 teams, will contest the largest ever World Cup across 16 host cities, including 11 in the United States, 3 in Mexico, and 2 in Canada. The format, each team plays in a group of 4 in a 3-match round robin, earning 3 points for a win and 1 for a draw. The knockout phase, now doubled in size to 32 teams, will include every first and second place group finisher and the 8th best third place teams. The favorites, Spain, France, and England, are rated highest by odds makers, followed in varying order by Portugal, Argentina, Brazil, and Germany. The defending champion led by Lionel Messi, Argentina, won their 3rd World Cup in 2022. They're attempting to be the first repeat champions since Pelé helped Brazil to the 1958 and 1962 crowns. The debutantes. Thanks in part to the expanded field, 4 nations will be making their World Cup debuts: Cape Verde, Curacao, Jordan, and Uzbekistan. 5 World Cup stars. Kylian Mbappé, France, already a World Cup winner in 2018, he became the 2nd player in history to score a hat trick in the World Cup final in 2022. He also was first to do so and not win the tournament after Argentina triumphed on penalties following a 3-3 draw. Next is Lamine Yamal from Spain. The 18-year-old FC Barcelona prodigy is the most hyped teenager at the World Cup since the 17-year-old Pelé dazzled the world in Sweden in 1958. Unlike Pelé, Yamal already has major tournament experience from Spain's Euro 2024 title. The third is Erling Haaland from Norway. The Viking-esque striker is a major reason his nation has returned to the World Cup finals following a 28-year absence. He's also the three-time Premier League goal-scoring champion with Manchester City. Next is Lionel Messi from Argentina. The 8-time Ballon d'Or winner is now 38 years old and no longer the tornado-like player of his prime. But he is also a wiser than he was in those days and can still find the net. And finally, Cristiano Ronaldo from Portugal. Like Messi, the 41-year-old Ronaldo has lost a step from his peak years with Real Madrid, but he's still the focal point in Portugal's attack under manager Roberto Martinez and one of their two most important players along with Bruno Fernandes. And we'll stop there, Ted.
Okay, let the games begin.
Yes.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Time is 30 minutes after the hour. And now we turn to the advice column of Asking Eric. And the headline is, After Estrangement, Son Misses Out on a Hefty Inheritance. Dear Eric, I lost my husband 2 years ago after a long, drawn-out decline. It was a traumatic ending. Our son, who's now in his late 40s, was indifferent to his father's decline. Our son has always been a challenge. Difficult teenage years with lots of poor decisions and rebellious behavior. He did not want to be part of our family, and he adopted other families as his own. He calls other people mom and dad, does not call or keep in touch with us, and I've accepted his decisions. We were not bad parents. We provided a solid family life, celebrated birthdays, Christmas, and vacations. We had a loving home. When my son was 13, he started breaking the rules, smoking and selling pot, being disrespectful, skipping school, and being embarrassed by us. He was not abused or neglected in any way. He called his father's life work crap and diminished us in every way. Now that my husband has passed, I'm in the process of making a new will. I do not wish to leave my son anything because he has disavowed us. He will be surprised that our estate is larger than he expects. He's very detached and treats me with contempt. Should I leave a letter to explain this, or just let the chips fall where they may? And it's signed, No Longer Mom. And Eric replies, Dear No Longer Mom, leaving a letter may help clarify your intentions and motivations, though talk it through with your estate lawyer to ensure that its existence doesn't complicate or contradict anything in your new will. However, it seems like the primary purpose of the letter will be to grant you a sense of closure for your painfully unfair part of your life. There's nothing wrong with that, but it may be more effective for you to let the legal documents speak for themselves. He may not be expecting anything at this point, and use your letter to just focus on how you felt and what you need to say to him. After writing it and thinking about it, you may even decide to send it sooner. In this case, conflating the disinheritance with his dismissal of you may make the issue seem to only be about money. The real issue is the breakdown of the relationship and your feelings about that breakup, and they deserve to be heard clearly. Our next letter, Dear Eric. I'm navigating a tricky neighborhood issue and could use your insights. A few years ago, my neighbor planted a mango tree on our property line, which directly violates our HOA's strict 2-foot setback rule for fruit trees. Now that the tree is growing rapidly, I'm concerned the future fruit will attract pests, creating a nuisance. I plan to speak with her soon about the situation, potentially regarding the tree's removal. What's your advice on handling this? And it's signed simply, Tree. Eric replies, Dear Tree, it seems unlikely that your neighbor shares your concern about pests and nuisances since she planted the tree. So I doubt she'd be inclined to remove it, especially without evidence of a problem. Right now, the only evidence of a problem is the tree's location itself, since it does violate the HOA rules. Accordingly, you may want to start by asking her to have it moved before it starts to get too big, reminding her of the strictness of the rules. This avoids making the tree's location a personal grievance. In an ideal scenario, this also maintains neighborly communication. However, it has the potential to backfire or draw you into an ongoing debate. The easiest course of action may be to consult your HOA. They will have a system for addressing rule violations and setting things right. Next letter, Dear Eric. This is in reference to the growing tired. The letter writer's cousin had cancer, and the chemo gives her terrible side effects. The cousin refuses to sell her home to pay for more care, and the letter writer doesn't know what to do. It sounds like the ill cousin may be eligible for visiting nurse assistant VNA services, which are often covered by Medicare. If she's as sick as the letter indicates, she may ultimately need hospice care, which is also provided by the VNA, and it would be a good idea to get her on service for an easier transition down the line. The letter writer should discuss this with the cousin and the cousin's medical team, and it's signed RN. Eric replies, Dear RN, this is a good option for the letter writer to look into. There are a wide range of VNA service providers. When searching, the letter writer or the cousin should be sure to seek out an accredited service that requires all their nurses to be licensed and certified. It's also important that the VNA specialize in the kind of care that the cousin needs or will need further down the line.
And our first live feature, Trump stronghold grapples with ICE site health risks. Until recently, this city, about 45 minutes east of Atlanta, was best known for its Blue Willow Inn cookbooks featuring recipes for Southern dishes. Lately, however, the community has been trying to stave off a new identity of Prison Town as it fights the opening of what could become the nation's largest immigration detention center, holding up to 10,000 people. Walton County, home to the city of about 5,500, voted overwhelmingly for Trump in 2024. But as the administration's mass deportation strategy hits closer to home, with plans moving forward to transform a more than $1 million square foot warehouse into a holding pen, locals say the city's infrastructure just can't handle such an influx of people. This month, the Social Circle filed a lawsuit in federal court against U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The city's complaint argues that the operation of a detention facility, what it calls a mega center, would harm public health, strain the local fresh water and sewage treatment systems, and overburden emergency medical services due to Social Circle's modest EMS capacity and DHS's nebulous plan for emergency transport, referring to the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees ICE. The community is very unified, City Manager Eric Taylor said. We want them to go away. Social Circle is one of several communities across the country thrust into a charged national debate about the administration's mass immigrant deportation strategy. Last year, Todd Lyons, who is serving as acting director of ICE until the end of May, described a goal to have the mass deportation operate with the efficiency of Amazon.com. Deportations would move like Prime, but with human beings, he said at a border security expo in Phoenix. ICE is now putting every person they seek to deport in detention, including those with no criminal records, without the possibility of release on bond. In January, the agency held almost twice as many people as it had that same month in 2024 under President Joe Biden. However, while many supporters remain aligned with Trump, some locals fear their city's stability will be jeopardized. Social Circle is not exactly flourishing, but it's making it, said Gareth Fenley, a retired social worker who ran for state senate in 2024 as a Democrat and was not among the locals who voted for Trump. If Social Circle becomes a prison town, she said, we're going to lose what we have. In February, DHS purchased the 235-acre site in Social Circle for almost $129 million, nearly 5 times its assessed value. It plans to house more people there than at Rikers Island Correctional Facility in New York City, and nearly triple the number of people now housed at the country's biggest immigration detention facility, which is in El Paso, Texas. I thought it was a joke, said John Miller when he first read about the plans last year. He and his wife Kathleen lived in Social Circle for 21 years. Their 50-acre horse farm is across the street from the detention center site. The Millers support Trump's immigration stance, but feel that turning the vacant warehouse into a detention center would recreate the problems his administration is trying to solve. Whether people are concentrated in a detention center or out in the public, they're still there, John Miller said. DHS estimates that the facility would require about 1 million gallons of water daily, according to the city's suit, which alleges that volume would bleed residents' taps dry and contaminate local streams with sewage. Emergency medical calls from the detention center, the lawsuit claims, would overwhelm the city's first responders, which Taylor said clock in at 14 firefighters, 15 police officers, and 2 school resource officers. The city relies on Walton County for ambulance services. Taylor said federal officials had only one meeting with local leaders and brushed off concerns about water, sewage, and emergency care, which administration officials said the site wouldn't need to use. I don't buy that, Taylor said, and that's the problem. The administration's swift escalation of immigrant detention has exacerbated long-standing allegations of medical neglect for those in custody across the country and led to the highest number of detainee deaths in at least 2 decades. 3 detention facilities in Folkestone, Georgia, about an hour north of Jacksonville, Florida, issued 130 emergency calls from February 4th, 2025 to February 3rd, 2026, according to dispatch reports obtained by KFF Health News through a public records request. The calls from the facilities, which holds about 2,000 people, were for wide-ranging reasons, including anaphylaxis, assault, suicide attempts, overdoses, seizures, strokes, head injuries from falls, and other health issues. GEO Group, ICE's largest contractor, runs the Folkestone facility, provides around-the-clock access to medical care, and relies on emergency medical services as needed, said Christopher Ferreira, Director of Corporate Relations. ERO El Paso Camp East Montana, built on a Texas military base, is currently the nation's largest detention center and holds about 2,500 people. In the 5 months from August 17, 2025 to January 20, 2026, about 130 emergency medical calls were made from the site, according to city records. Several detainees have died at the facility. Several others have tested positive for tuberculosis, measles, or COVID-19. Amentum Services, which recently took over management of the facility, did not respond to questions about emergency calls. Even bigger detention facilities, such as the one planned in Social Circle, would only supercharge those health issues and bring them to new communities, said Michelle Brain, who is an immigration ombudsman at the Department of Homeland Security under Biden. Existing facilities already suffer from staffing shortages, poor ventilation, hygiene, and insufficient medical care, she said. The proposed facilities are enormous and generally built for boxes, not people. There is no way without extreme costs, both to the community and just in dollars, to make these safe for humans, she said.
Our next headline is Lebanon could be what derails Trump's peace talks. For weeks now, President Trump has repeatedly promised, at least 37 times by some estimates, an accord with Iran is right around the corner. Yet, an issue far removed from the conflict's epicenter may end up being the biggest obstacle to any treaty, and that's Lebanon. That disruptive potential was well on display over 18 hours, starting Sunday, when Israel attacked the Lebanese capital, Beirut, prompting Iran to lob missiles at Israel for what it said was its violation of the ceasefire. The Israeli strikes came after Hezbollah's militant rockets hit northern Israel. The fracas estimated to exchanges of missiles and airstrikes that threatened to plunge the region into full-blown conflict once again, and even widen the war to include Yemen's Houthi rebels. Calm was restored soon after Trump, somewhat frenetically, demanded that Israel and Iran immediately stop shooting. Later, he took a scolding tone when he insisted yet again that the negotiations would soon end the war, subject to ignorance or stupidity getting in the way. But the situation underscored the fragility of Trump's neither war nor peace approach that negotiations. Another reminder of the tenuous nature of the U.S.-Iran ceasefire came Tuesday, when Iran downed a U.S. Army Apache helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz. After Trump vowed the U.S. would respond out of necessity, the military launched strikes on Iranian targets. For Israel, and especially Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the fragility of the ceasefire may be the point. Many Israelis fear any U.S. deal with the Islamic Republic would leave them facing an implacable foe, one that, even without nuclear weapons, could threaten them with missiles or attacks from allies such as Hezbollah, a Lebanese Shiite militant group that Iran nurtured over decades into a capable paramilitary faction and political party. Trump doesn't see Lebanon as a priority, so if he can reach a nuclear deal with Iran, he's flexible on Lebanon, said Joel McCarron, a Beirut-based geopolitical analyst. But Israel views Lebanon as a key theater with which to have a veto on the U.S.-Iran talks. Whenever Netanyahu feels they're close to be done, he does something in Lebanon, because this is the space where he can really impact the talks, he said. Multiple U.S. brokered ceasefires between the Lebanese and Israeli governments have failed to stop the fighting. Hezbollah rejected all those pacts, including one signed last week that called on it to unilaterally halt operations and withdraw from southern Lebanon. While Hezbollah continued attacking northern Israel, the Israeli military intensified its occupation of Lebanese territory. Iran, meanwhile, says the ceasefire with the U.S. must see gun silence on all fronts, including Lebanon, a position that is a non-starter for Israel. Though Iran complained about Israel's earlier attacks in southern Lebanon, the strikes did not spur a reaction. But Tehran drew a red line on the Daya, the southern suburbs of Beirut, where Hezbollah holds sway. The exchanges this week were the worst breakdown in the U.S.-Iranian truce, but they weren't the first time it was almost derailed by Israel's campaign in Lebanon. In April, Trump was all but press-ganged Netanyahu into reducing hostilities with Hezbollah after powerful attacks on Beirut threatened to upend the ceasefire only days after it went into effect. Hezbollah joined the fight in March, a few days after the U.S.-Israeli assault on Iran began, lobbing missiles and drones at northern Israel in solidarity with Iran, and, it said, to respond to Israel's repeated violations of the previous ceasefire that was signed in November of 2024. Pat, over to you.
Israel responded with a brutal air campaign and by deepening its ground invasion into the southern Lebanon in what is said was a bid to neutralize or destroy Hezbollah and create a buffer zone on Lebanese soil. So far, some 3,666 people have been killed. Lebanon's health ministry says while a quarter of the population has been displaced and more than a tenth of the country occupied. That Netanyahu would risk angering Trump this week is partly a function of electoral politics. He faces re-election in October and is trailing in polls. He's also contending with an Israeli public clamoring for a tougher line with Hezbollah, with or without U.S. approval. Iran, meanwhile, has its own calculations in coming to Hezbollah's aid, even if it meant triggering a wider conflagration. This was a multi-pronged effort at reasserting deterrence, said Sanam Vakil, Director of Middle East and North Africa Programs at Chatham House, a London-based think tank. This was an existential war for Iran, and because it survived, it's thinking of the day after, Vakil said. It wants to project to its people, but also to the region, that it's here to stay, that it's an unpredictable Islamic republic, not a defeated one. Iran's new leadership also wanted to demonstrate that the more cautious policies espoused by the previous supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, who was killed on the first day of the war, were no longer in play. After the Hamas-led October 7, 2023 attacks, Israel pursued the so-called Axis of Resistance, a constellation of Iran-supported militias and governments that includes Hezbollah. Iran largely stood back while Israel eviscerated them and assassinated or toppled their leaders. But this week's confrontation with Israel, the first time Iran engaged in direct hostilities in defense of an ally, represents a significant shift, said the head of Iran's Expediency Discernment Council. Iran's attack in defense of Lebanon was not merely a military response, rather it was the formal declaration of a strategic doctrine, he said. said the brother of Iran's top security official who was killed early in the war. This action sent a clear message that if one of the sides of the axis of resistance is attacked, it will result in a response beyond geographical borders and will change the equations of the region. This week's missile barrage also made for good PR, especially in Lebanon, where the government has moved to stop Iran's patronage of Hezbollah and limit its influence on the country's affairs. Lebanon's leadership has insisted on holding ceasefire negotiations with Israel separate from those involving Iran. But for many Lebanese, especially Shiites who form the backbone of Hezbollah's support, Iran's willingness to go to war for Hezbollah contrasts sharply with the government's conciliatory policies toward Israel and not in the government's favor. The Iranians won by points because although they did nothing in Israel that was very damaging, they achieved a symbolic objective. It also seems clear that Iran sees opportunity in Trump's reluctance to restart the war. The Iranians are reading Trump correctly. They recognize he wants out. But they're also calculating that none of this is going to go away or be easily resolved. And so they're trying to hold on to this partnership with Hezbollah they've built over decades. With neither side willing to back down, a new confrontation over Lebanon appears to be a matter of time. On Tuesday, Israel ramped up strikes on Tyre, a city that before the war was home to about 100,000 people and considered southern Lebanon's economic heart. Earlier in the day, the Israeli military issued the first time evacuation orders for the entire city, including its Christian quarter, which was excluded from earlier assaults.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for June 11th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Pat Lamont
and Ted Pajecki. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability